Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes on our webinar, Italy North to South. I see a few people have joined already. While we wait for the others to join for the last couple of minutes, if you would just scroll down to the bottom of your screen and click on the button marked chat and let us know where it is that you are dialing in from today. Just gives us a sense of where our members are joining in from. So, and as I say, we've got about just over 2 minutes before we get started. And yeah, as I say, we have a couple of people on. So yeah, please, as I say, use that chat function. Also, it's a way for us to test to make sure that you're able to access that you're able to ask any questions as we go along. We'll deal with the questions at the end because we'll have everybody on mute, but this way we'll be able to make sure that everything is working the way that it should. Good morning, I see David from Collingwood. Good morning, David. Nina is here from Toronto. Welcome. Got a Mary here from Toronto as well. Excellent. I've got a Mark from Swift Rock. There you go. There's a town I haven't even heard of. Welcome this morning. I'm not going to introduce everybody, but I'm happy to see everybody slowly joining us. So just 2 minutes left to go before we start our webinar on Italy North to South. So if you've just joined us in the last minute, if you could please scroll down to the bottom of the screen and then let us know where it is that you are calling in from this morning. Then that just gives us a sense of who's here with us today. And as I say, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We're about just over 1 minute away. So we'll probably wait for maybe just one more minute after that in case for those that are not familiar with the technology, then it's always good for us to give a little bit of extra time. But just like the how I host these tours, I like to leave on time as much as possible. So I'll make the request one more time. I see a couple more have just joined in. So if you've just joined in, please scroll to the bottom of your screen. And there is with your mouse, there's a button marked chat. And if you click on that button and you let us know where it is that you're calling in from today, then it just gives us a little bit of a sense of who's here with us, of where all our members are. I see we've got folks a lot from Ontario. We've got a handful here from out in Western Canada. And so thank you for joining in relatively early in the morning. So we're about to get started here. Just going to give it just another few seconds. Welcome to our webinar this morning, Italy North to South. We're just going to see if anybody else joins us. And just one last time, if you could scroll down to the bottom of your screen, click on the button marked chat and tell us where it is that you are coming, where it is that you're dialing in from this morning. That would be great. I see Diane from Kelowna as well. And I see a couple more people. I'm not going to go through all the names. Anyway, it's 1 minute past 10, so let's get started with our webinar this morning, Italy North to South. Welcome to everyone from all different parts of Canada that have joined us this morning. So as I said, everybody's going to be on mute for this presentation. But if you do have questions at any time, please scroll down to that same chat button and then type your question in there. And then at the end, when we get to the Q&A section, we'll be able to answer all your questions at that point. So let's start off. And for those of you who have perhaps not participated in our webinar or whom I have not met at an event before, what Wheel and Anchor is all about is about bringing travelers together. And so when we say that, one of the visions that we had when we started Wheel and Anchor was all about all those people out there who really have a desire to experience travel with like-minded people. And when we say travel, we mean something that is more than just sort of going on holiday down south to the Caribbean or Florida, but it's really about going out to learn and experience cultures and history and all those things, all those enriching things that we go out and travel the world for. And by doing that with other people who we are acquainted with, it just makes it so much more of a fun experience. So that's who we are here at Wheel and Anchor. And my goal personally for each and every one of our members is that you become well-traveled and well-connected. Well, what does that mean to be well-traveled? And it's not just going to check off a country in a box. And I know that is certainly something that a lot of us, myself included, like to do, is how many countries have we been to or how many cities have we been to? But it's about learning something. It's about experiencing a different people and a different language and their customs and traditions and their food, and really being able to come back then to Canada and share those experiences. Let's face it, part of travel, I always say travel begins in the months before you go, in the anticipation of going, and of course the experience itself, but it's about sharing the stories and everything that you've learned and experienced along the way. And so by being well-traveled, it's really something that enriches your life. And of course, through our vision of bringing travelers together, you get connected not only to the people that you travel with, but also to other people that you might meet along the way. And that's part of the beauty of how we design programs like this one, is that it's all about people, meeting locals. So just to introduce who is on our webinar today, our team. Myself, I'm Gordon. You may have seen me before in one of our newsletters. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. My right-hand man is Joel Curry, who provides our technical support, make sure nothing goes wrong today on our webinar. And Cassandra McKinnon is our senior member services specialist who's on the call. So if you ever call in to make an inquiry or to book any one of our tours, you'll be talking to Cassandra in all likelihood. And then finally, Amber Riedel, who is the host of this program. And I must say, Amber was not able to join us this morning. We're quite disappointed in that, but Amber is been a long time friend and acquaintance of mine. She is a self-made entrepreneur, extremely well-traveled all around the globe. She's been to Italy numerous times, which is why I selected her to host this program. But being an entrepreneur, she's just in the process of a major business deal that I can't get into, and she had to take an emergency call this morning. So I'm very sorry that Amber won't be here, but she is the perfect person to host this tour, since she's very familiar with Italy, very passionate about Italy. And we'll be bringing her out. She'll be coming out to some of the events that we're holding in the next month or two here in Ontario. If you happen to be out this way, then please come and meet Amber. So how this session is going to go this morning, this is really about you. And that's why we do that in this format, because it's interactive in the sense that you have an opportunity live to ask any questions you have about the program when we get to that Q&A session, and really to learn a little bit about Italy, whether you come along on the program or not. Hopefully this gives you a bit of an insight into what the different regions of Italy are all about. And I'm here to be your guide. Of course, the guide on this program is Amber, but for the purposes of this webinar, I'm really here to help you understand the kinds of things that you'd see along the way. And the subject of our exploration today, of course, Italy, where we're traveling in October of this year, and we're going to get a real great overview of the whole country. So let's move on and talk first of all a little bit about Italy itself. I mean, it hardly needs any introduction. The big boot in the middle of the Mediterranean that we've all learned about way back in geography class in public school. Italy is certainly our most requested destination. Everybody wants to go to Italy, even those that have been to Italy, once, twice, three times before. There are so many things to do. The experience is so great. It sells itself. And on our trip here through Italy, which as you know, is one of the largest countries in Europe, and as the point there that we stuck in, they produce more wine than any other place in the planet, and I'll speak about that in a moment. We're going to take a look at Italy from the very north part, so all the way up in the Piedmont and Lombardy regions, bordering Austria, and where we'll start the tour for the first part, and then we'll hit the central part of Tuscany, which is of course needs no introduction, before we then spend the last few days down in the south, visiting Amalfi Coast from our base in Sorrento, and it's going to be an amazing trip. Just to give you an overview of what the itinerary is, looking at our map, which you can also find on our magazine, we're flying into Milan. And we're not actually spending any time in Milan on this tour, but I know a couple of people already have said that they want to visit Milan. I highly recommend then, if you want to do that, is flying a day or two early. It's very easy to get from the airport to downtown Milan, and then you can really walk around. Most everything there is to see in Milan is within walking distance of Centrale, of the downtown railway station there. So it would be great to fly in a day or two early and explore Milan. But we'll be starting from Milan airport and then heading right out to Lake Garda, where we'll spend the first 4 nights. After that, we're going to drive down through the countryside, through the Po Valley, into Florence, in the heart of Tuscany, where we'll spend 5 nights. Exploring that whole region from our base in Florence, continuing then down by train all the way down to Naples, where we'll then hop on a coach and hit Sorrento at the edge of the famous Amalfi Coast. So that's the overview of the program. I'll now take you through a little bit, some of the highlights and some of the experiences we can expect to have day by day as we go through Italy. So our program departs Canada on October the 14th. We recommend there's a nonstop flight from Toronto to Milan. Those of you coming from either east or west, we can arrange connections to you either through Toronto, if that makes sense, or through another European gateway to get yourself into Milan, where we'll arrive the next morning. And as I say, we're going to head straight off to Lake Garda. But for those that wish, you could, this is a photo of the Galleria in the center of Milan. You could come a couple of days early and take in Milan on your own. And we'll arrive, of course, in the afternoon. It's just a couple hours drive from Milan to Desenzano on the southern shore of Lake Garda, where we will enjoy the next 4 nights. Lake Garda, as soon as you arrive into this area, this Lake District of Italy, you're going to be absolutely blown away by the city. We're staying at the wonderful Palace Hotel in Desenzano, which is right adjacent to the lake. And hopefully we'll have some great weather, and the views looking up to the mountains in the background are truly spectacular. I love the Italian Lake District. Lake Garda, I've frankly only been by once before, but I know the other Italian lakes very, very well. And this is clearly one of the most celebrated parts of the country. The lake itself is the largest one in all of Italy. And it's remarkably warm despite its size. And part of that is because they actually have hot springs in the northern part of the lake. That if you talk to some locals, if you can find out where they are, the water there is obviously particularly warm where those hot springs are. But even the lake itself, even in October, is quite swimmable. You'll probably find it certainly warmer than the Great Lakes. I wouldn't go swimming in Lake Ontario in October, but Lake Garda, you could theoretically still go swimming in October. Of course, it might be a little cooler outside. I remember going by there once one time I was there in July, and there was a festival on. So it was by sheer coincidence. And it was at that time that I realized that this festival called the Salo Festival, was named because this gentleman, Gasparo de Salo, was actually the founder, the guy that invented the violin. He was based here. He spent most of his time here on the shores of Lake Garda. So you can probably imagine how he was inspired to create music in this beautiful environment. I like the region, frankly, because of its olive oil. I'm a bit of a foodie myself, I admit, And the area around Lake Garda has been growing olive trees literally for centuries, and they have some of the best olive oil that you can find in all of Italy. So you'll be certain to find it as we spend the next few days here in this region. Our first full day tour on day 3, we're going to visit Sirmione. And Sirmione is on a very narrow peninsula that juts out from the southern shore of the lake. And it's most known because it has a medieval castle on it called Rocca Scaligera. So we're going to head up there. It's not far from Desenzano. It's about a very short drive, about 20 minutes up to this peninsula. We'll get a chance to wander around. We'll get a tour of this medieval castle and have time to wander the streets. It's a great way to sort of spend our first day, maybe still a little bit jet lagged. And we can either stay there and enjoy lunch in Sirmione itself and make our way back. It's easy to hop a little local bus, or we'll travel back together and then enjoy the afternoon at our leisure. As I say, shaking off those cobwebs from the flight over, as well as taking in the beautiful South Shore. There's so many little places. If you like walking along the shoreline of Lake Garda is just simply magical in and of itself. So we'll have some time to do that on our first full day in the Lake Garda region. We'll then continue on the next day, and we'll have here a full day at leisure. Now, I must say here that the way that we're going to work this program, which is how I do most of my programs, is that we always have one full day in, I shouldn't say always, but in most cases in any particular spot. That way you have time to do the kinds of things that you don't otherwise do on an ordinary sightseeing tour where they're shuffling you every day from one place to the next. We might do this day of leisure the following day, or the last day that we spend on Lake Garda. We're probably going to make that call closer to the actual trip. We'll look at the weather. We'll look at various factors. So just wanted to let you know it's not fixed on this day. It's going to depend on a number of factors, but there will be one full day of leisure. And what would you do on that full day? Well, there's a whole bunch of different things, and we're going to point you in the direction that is most suited to what you want to do. For those of you that love the scenery of the lake, well, who doesn't love the scenery of the lake? You might want to head up to Gargano, which is on the western shore of the lake. You can get up there by a ferry boat. They still run into October. It's about an hour and a half, 2-hour ferry ride. Spectacular along the western shore, which is backed by these steep mountains, the Dolomites, and you can visit Gargano. And again, it's a lovely, lovely little town. You get a sense of the backdrop with the white-capped Alps. So that might be one thing that you decide to do. Alternatively, what I suspect most will do, unless they've already been there, is together with Amber, we'll hop on the train and we'll head for Venice. It's, again, this is something that we'll literally organize on the spot. It's only about a 90-minute train ride away, and we can be right at Santa Lucia station in the heart of Venice. And from there, we can wander around for the whole day or part of the day, because the trains run very, very regularly. And that's, again, what makes this kind of a neat program is that there's no optional tour here per se. I mean, it's optional in the sense that you can go along for the ride. Amber will escort those who wish to go over to Venice, and then we can explore it. And Venice is one of those cities, sure, you can take a guide who's going to point you, this is on the left and this is on the right, and we can organize that locally. Or I frankly, and I've been to Venice numerous times, like to just wander around and get lost. Now, when I say get lost, we always make sure you know where the meeting point is, where it is that we can all get together so we can get you back on the train to come back. But Venice doesn't need any introduction. I mean, the gondolas with their singing gondoliers. I mean, it is a romantic. It's a beautiful town, city to visit, and we'll have a full day. You could even spend the evening there and watch the sunset over the lagoons around Venice before coming back at night. The day will be truly at your leisure to enjoy it as you wish. And again, we will facilitate that the way that it best suits you. The next day, so we're going to head back out from Desenzano, from our hotel, and head south to the towns of Verona and Mantua. And you'll know these towns from Shakespeare, because they're mentioned in so many of Shakespeare's plays. The photo here, of course, is of Juliet's house from the famous in the famous play Romeo and Juliet. And Verona is not usually on most people's tourist maps. Again, these tours, I hate to say generic ones, tend to hit, Venice, and they'll hit Milan and the bigger cities. And Verona is often overlooked, and I think it's a little bit unfair. That's why I wanted to spend part of the day here, because it has some incredible sites in the so-called Centro Storico, the historical center of Verona, and you'll get a flavor of what inspired some of these Shakespearean plays. So we'll spend half a day in Verona, and then we'll have lunch. We'll continue down to Mantua, which is, again, yet another town that is mentioned in so many of the Shakespearean plays. Its center is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. As I mentioned in the slide earlier, there's 56 World Heritage Sites in all of Italy, and this is just one of them. You will likely, well, not likely, will definitely stop at the Palazzo Ducale, which is a 500-room mansion built in the 14th century. It's just one of the many amazing sites that we'll see while we visit Mantua. So this is our day tour to Verona and to Mantua. We'll then head back to Desenzano to spend our last night overlooking Lake Garda, before we then head out on October the 19th. And we're now going to head south by coach. It's the easiest way to get from Lake Garda to the central part of Italy. And we're going to stop along the way, and unfortunately I didn't have a great picture of it. We're going to stop at Rocetta Mattai. This is one of those ones, again, most of the people have never heard of this. It is a fortress, a privately built fortress that has a whole fusion of architectural styles like medieval, Gothic, and Moorish, and so on. And this will be our stop along the way. After that, we'll have lunch at an agriturismo, which is, if you haven't heard the term agriturismo before, it's kind of like farm to table. We visit a local Italian farm where most of the food that's served on the table is fresh, and it comes directly from the immediate area, and it's part of the Italian experience. And undoubtedly we'll have a glass of wine there before we continue our journey. And this brings me to the topic of Italian wine itself. It needs no introduction. I'm sure you've had at least a glass or two. They've been growing wine in Italy for literally 4,000 years. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Italy is actually the largest wine producing region in the world. They produce something like 5 billion liters of wine every year. I think the Italians themselves consume something like 55 liters of wine each year themselves. You consider that. So that's why they need all that wine, not to mention that we're lucky that they export it to the rest of us. I've been lucky to go through many of the wine regions in Italy. We're going to see a few of them on this trip. As I say, in the north part, we'll be visiting the wine regions of, or we'll be staying in the wine region of Lombardy, which is where Lake Garda is located. If we go to Venice, we'll go to see Veneto, which actually I had a distant cousin who had a wine estate in Veneto. Veneto is famous for Prosecco, among other things. And I remember trekking through the vineyards way back when I was a teenager, backpacking through Europe. The north part of Italy has its own distinct flair. Then the central part, Tuscany, where we're obviously going to spend the next 5 days, its wines, Chianti is perhaps the most famous. I'm sure you've tried a Chianti before, the one with the wicker, the bottle that's in the wicker wrapping, if you will. And the grape Sangiovese. I hope we will have the chance together with Amber to do some tasting, so you can discover some of the subtleties in a grape like Sangiovese, which is used in so many other brands of wine that you may not know that it all originates with this grape Sangiovese. And then finally, when we're in the south part, we'll be visiting the wine region of Campania, which is in the area around Naples. And there you'll discover some wines that are less well known. I mean, unless you're really an Italian wine fanatic. For example, there's one called Aglianico, which I quite enjoy, and it's something that it's a specialty in the southern part of Italy. So you can't really visit Italy without experiencing some of its wines firsthand. And as I always say, they keep the best ones for themselves. So you can walk into a market in Italy and pick up a bottle of wine for even €3 or €4, and you'd be surprised the quality of wine that you can get for really next to nothing compared to what we're used to paying for wine here in Canada. So on our we'll be staying in Florence, as I mentioned, for 5 nights at a beautiful hotel, likely the Baglioni in central Florence, from where you can really walk to everything that you want to see. But our first day out, we're going to head to visit Pisa and Lucca. And Pisa, of course, needs no introduction. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is probably one of the most known monuments in all of Italy. It was built way back in the 12th century in 1173, and it started leaning from the very beginning because I guess they didn't realize that the ground was kind of soft, and it kept leaning until I guess it was about 20 years ago when they actually closed the tower for a number of years because it truly was at risk of falling over. But they managed to prop it up, and they corrected the lean somewhat, but they didn't take it away because otherwise it wouldn't have that allure that it has anymore. So we'll go there. You can actually walk all the way up to the top of the tower. It's 250 steps for those that want to. But it's one of those things that you can't say you visited Italy unless you've been up the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It sits in the middle of the Square of Miracles, and I think they aptly named that because that it's a miracle that the tower was able to lean for centuries without actually falling over. In the latter part of the day and the afternoon, we'll head over to Lucca, which is not far from Pisa. This is one of my favorite towns. It's perhaps most known for its Renaissance walls that are incredibly well preserved, that encircle the whole Centro Storico, or the whole historical center. So we're going to spend a good few hours here in Lucca, perhaps exploring some of the churches. This is not an ABC tour, although there's so many churches in Italy you couldn't go through without visiting some of the churches. And the ones in particular that I find that there's a few of them here, like the one that's pictured, that have such incredible frescoes. And I'm not much of a church goer myself, but you can't. You're just totally taken aback by how incredibly beautiful and how well restored that these frescoes are in some of these churches. They are really, really impressive. So that's going to be our day visiting Pisa and Lucca. Then when we're going to go back then, and on the 8th day of our trip, we'll spend the full day in Florence itself. And so the program for this day is, and Florence is a town you just have to walk around. I was lucky. I was just there about a month and a half ago in January. And I got to see it when there was hardly anybody there from a tourism standpoint. It's a little chilly in January. But it reacquainted me with the city that I just loved. I first visited there as a teenager. And so on our tour, we're going to have a 3-hour orientation tour in the morning, which is, I must say, completely optional, because the thing about Florence is that everybody has a thing that they want to see. And if you're not even sure what that is, then it's well worthwhile, going online, Googling, do I want to go to the Uffizi Gallery to see Michelangelo's David, which for many people is really a highlight of visiting Florence. Or perhaps you want to go to the Duomo itself, which the cathedral, that's what's pictured here, is truly impressive. You do have to go and ideally get there first thing in the morning, because even in January when I was there, the lineup was down the block. It's a very, very busy place. There's other things like the Accademia Gallery, which has other works by famous Renaissance area artists. There's so many things to do in Florence. So for those that haven't been, join our panoramic tour. We will. The idea is that it points out where all these other attractions are, these other main sites that you might want to see, and then you'll have the whole rest of the day to go and explore the things that you specifically want to see. Just walking over Ponte Vecchio, the old bridge with its jewelry shops adorning it, and all the cafes. Florence is, I could spend a month there. So we'll have at least one full day, and of course some time on our other days, because we'll be staying right in the center of Florence. Then on our next full day, we're going to head out to the coast. We're going to head back out west, about a 2-hour drive, heading for Cinque Terre. And Cinque Terre is one of the two. We're going to be visiting both famous coastlines in Italy. Amalfi, of course, later on. But here, Cinque Terre is I don't know which one I like better. They're both pretty spectacular, with these villages perched up on cliffs like Mararola, which is the one that's pictured here. We're going to spend the whole day touring around. The ideal program that we'll do if the weather and sea conditions permit is we'll drive there by coach, but then we'll leave the coach behind. The roads in and around these villages are extremely narrow, and the traffic is very tight. So the best way is to go from village to village is by boat and by train. So we'll do a combination of that. We'll try to take in at least 3 of the villages. It depends a little bit on how the sea conditions are, but no matter what, you'll get a good taste of these amazing towns, one more beautiful than the other, that are in this area called Cinque Terre. So that'll be our full day there. We'll then head back again to Florence, and our last full day tour in this area will be to Siena and San Gimignano, or San G, since most people have difficulty pronouncing it. Siena, perched up on top of a hill, like you see here. It's a medieval city with an incredibly huge square in the middle. It's not a big town. So it's you can easily walk all around it in about an hour. I remember having gone through in these very relatively steep cobblestone streets that make up the interior of Siena. And so, but standing in the middle of the Piazza del Campo and looking at the bell tower, it's one of the most chilling is the wrong word. One of the most amazing towns in Tuscany. So we'll have time there to enjoy some lunch. And then we'll hit San Gimignano, which again is equally beautiful. It's perched up as well on a hill, but what makes it a little bit different is all of these towers that they built. So they called it the Manhattan of the Middle Ages, because while many of these towns would have one single tower, often the church tower, the church spire would be the highest. This one has several of them. So get an orientation as to why San G has so many of these towers. So this gives us a bit of a flavor for what the hillside, the countryside towns in Tuscany are all about by visiting 2 of the main ones, Siena and San Gimignano. After that, our 5 nights in Florence will come to a close, and then we'll hop on a train going south. So we're going to do this next stretch of the journey by train. It's almost 500 kilometers from Florence all the way to Naples. And Italy has an amazing high-speed rail network, so we'll get on their so-called Frecciarossa, the red express train, which will rocket us in just 3 hours all the way down to Naples, where we will get off with Mount Vesuvius, as you see in the photo here in the background, and we'll hop on our coach, and we'll head down from Naples down to hit Sorrento. So Sorrento is on the bay of Naples, and at the northernmost edge of the Amalfi coast. And it in and of itself is a beautiful town. Now, most people come to Sorrento primarily to visit the Amalfi coast, which of course that we're going to do, but we'll have a couple hours, we'll have some time in the afternoon after we arrive to walk around Sorrento itself. It has some terrific narrow alleyways. It's famous for its limoncello and for its cheese. So it's well worth it to spend some time exploring a little bit of Sorrento on our own. But of course, we'll then head on our first full day down to the Amalfi Coast on the 12th day of our trip. We'll have a full day trip to this UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is, again, next to Cinque Terre, is the most beautiful coast in the country. There are 13 villages that connect this very, very steep cliffs, which which drop right into the sea. It's super, super busy in the summertime. Like it's absolute madness. So October is a nice time to visit. I can't say, I mean, it's still going to be a lot of people there, but a wonderful time to visit. The temperature will be warm, but not super hot. Again, another benefit for October. In the summertime, the temperatures here often get well over 40 degrees. There's so many things that you could do. You could spend you could spend a week just walking or hiking around in this area. And frankly, walking or going by boat is the best way to get around. We'll be glad that we're not driving when you see the roads that are super, super narrow. That with the crazy Italian drivers, you wouldn't necessarily want to be driving yourself around. As I mentioned when I was talking about Sorrento, the area is also known for the lemon trees, and they grow these giant lemons that are so big, and they're actually organic. People locally, they eat the whole lemon, including the skin, which is quite interesting. So I'll leave it to you whether you want to try that. In fact, those were the lemons the sailors back in the explorer days would take with them on their ships across the Atlantic to avoid scurvy. So as I say, we'll visit a number of the towns. Amalfi itself is one of the places that we'll stop, as well as Positano. We have another free day, of course, on this section of the tour, and I can imagine some of you will probably want to return to the Amalfi Coast, although there's other things that you could do. As I say, we'll position this day at leisure, depending on a number of different factors, because we may want to take in the other sites before you decide what you want to do with your day at leisure. But on that day, we could, one of the things as I mentioned, cheese is really big in this region, in Sorrento. And they have this cheese factory, Casefficio Michelangelo, where they make some incredible cheeses, many of which are names that I've never heard of. I mean, I love my cheese, but I'm not exactly but certainly bocconcini, which is those little balls that taste like mozzarella, or provolone are a couple of the ones that you'll recognize. And then all the other ones, you can go in and have a tasting and learn a little bit about how they make these incredible cheeses in Italy. Our next full day tour will be out to the island of Capri. Capri is about an hour ride by ferry off the shore. The scenery is just breathtaking. These cliffs, these islands, sheer rocks that just jut out of the ocean. When we arrive there, we'll have a minibus and a guide that's going to sort of take us around and see some of the many sights there is to see. The island is, as you can see, very it's very steep with a lot of roads. So driving around is the best way to sort of get a flavor of what this place is all about. It's known to be a haven for the rich and famous. A lot of Europeans, wealthy people, have some spectacular villas. So we'll get a glimpse of those as we drive around. It's also known, of course, for the Blue Grotto. You might have heard of it before. Depending on our time, depending on the weather conditions, we may try to do an optional little excursion to see the Blue Grotto. It can take a long time. So my view with these things is it's the type of thing that if conditions are perfect, and if the wait isn't too long to get on one of the rowboats that takes you in there, then we'll do that. But otherwise, there's so many other things to see just by driving around and exploring Capri. So we'll have time. We'll have lunch there. You can wander around and find a little place on your own in one of the villages that we visit, and you'll be enchanted by Capri. It is really, really a special place. So we'll be back again in Sorrento for the night, and then on the next day we're going to hit Pompeii, which for me is one of the absolute highlights of any visit to Italy, particularly if you're down here in the south. And Pompeii, as you know, is a ghost town. It was quite a large city that was built back at around the days of Christ. But Mount Vesuvius erupted and, of course, completely buried it in 79 AD. Um, but the benefit to that is that when they started uncovering it and excavating the city, is that all those centuries went by, and it was very very well preserved. And anywhere in Europe when you walk around, it's amazing to have the feeling that you're walking on the same stones, and through the same buildings that people did hundreds of years ago. But Pompeii is nearly 2,000 years old, so that makes it particularly special, because the houses, the buildings that you see, whether it's the steam baths, the stores. So they actually had storefronts, much like our storefronts, where people lived above. You can see that the way that people lived and the way that their urban fabric was very similar to what it is today. I mean, we've kept a lot of the same built forms in our urban structures, and that's what I find amazing about Pompeii. Not to mention these statues that were built, and they just look like they came right out of the gallery in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Even the horse paths along the way were designed so carefully that the horse had his path in the middle, and the wagon wheels had their path, and then there was room on the sides for pedestrians to walk along. It was so well planned and thought out. And that's what makes Pompeii particularly interesting. I have a funny story that you can see there is that one of the places that they have, they even had a let's call it a house of ill repute, and the way that the sailors knew how to get there is that they carved into the street were male genitalia pointing in the direction of this place. Again, something that I've never seen in modern day society, yet they had it 2,000 years ago in Pompeii. So I can't say enough about it. It is a phenomenal. It will really astound you. It's better than any guidebook could ever possibly tell you. And of course, our visit to Pompeii will be our last full day tour, again, depending on how we allocate the free day, whether or not we do Pompeii earlier in the trip. But we'll be then heading for home on October the 29th. We'll hop in our coach, which will take us back to Fiumicino Airport in Rome, where we will either fly back to Canada, or for those of you that want to explore Rome, because I know, again, I had the question before from a few people who had said, we didn't put Rome in the program. Rome, for me, is a place that one can explore easily on one's own. It's not as walkable as Milan is. To get from the Colosseum to the Vatican and so on, it's a bit of a longer distance. But you can very easily and safely explore Rome. And so that's why we encourage you to stay on a few extra days to see Rome, and we'll happily make those arrangements for you. So now let me give you a quick overview of what of the program details of what it's all about. Of course, it's happening in this coming October from the 14th to the 29th. We're spending a total of 15 nights, so 14 nights on land, including the overnight flight to Europe. And the price is $63.50 Canadian dollars for 2 full weeks, which I think is actually quite amazing when you consider everything that's included in the program. That includes airfare based on a Toronto departure. Of course, we can facilitate a flight for you from pretty much anywhere in Canada. All of the transportation throughout, other than any of the optional excursions that we do, as well as local guides on every single day that isn't a free day. And then we have breakfast every day, and then we have either lunch or dinner every day. And how I do it with the meals is that we pick whatever the most appropriate is for that particular day, because part of being in Italy is wandering around these towns, whether be it for lunch, be it for dinner, and finding your own restaurant that you want to enjoy, as opposed to the group restaurants. I think we picked out some pretty excellent ones for this tour, but it's discovering those little places that give it part of the appeal. Of course, porterage at our hotels and all the taxes, service charge, all the tipping is included for any of the guides that are a part of our itinerary, and the services of Amber, who will be the wheel and anchor host from the day that you arrive in Milan all the way through till when you end. So what's not included? Well, of course, insurance and any other optional excursions, extra things and we don't sell optional excursions, by the way. All we do is we facilitate you to get there. So you basically are paying just the local price for a train ticket or a bus ticket if you want to go from A to B. And between Amber and our local guides, we set that all up for you. So it really makes a nice way for you to be able to do as much or as little as you want. And of course, any other meals that are not in the main part of the program are would be extra. But again, the majority is included. So a few $100s will cover you for anything that isn't built into the program. To get more information, we're going to have a Q&A section just coming up in a second here. But of course, you can contact us at any time by emailing or phoning either Cassandra or myself. Our numbers are there. They're also on the tour brochure on this program. We're always thrilled to hear from you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the program. And so now we can take a few questions. So I see a couple of questions have been typed in during the presentation. So I'm happy to ask any more. Please do write in your questions now by scrolling down to that chat box at the bottom of the screen. And of course, if you can't think of a question right now, then you can email us later. But let me take the first couple of questions that have come in. June asked about how much walking is on this tour. This is a walking tour. So, I can't underline that, the cities of, these ancient cities and towns in Italy, the coaches are, any form of transportation is quite banned other than local private vehicles and taxis and so on. So it does mean that we have to walk around quite a bit. There are a lot of steps in places. So you need to be comfortable to be able to walk pretty good distances. I mean, there's always a cafe to stop in, but I can't underestimate. This is definitely a walking tour. You'd be on your feet for several hours a day. And that's just how it is in Italy if you want to explore it. It's not a bus tour. We go from place to place, but it's definitely a lot of walking. So David is asked now about Milan and Rome. So as I mentioned, we didn't include them in the program just because we thought that overall time frame was going to be enough. But we can definitely facilitate an earlier arrival into Milan or a later departure from Rome. We can even suggest some hotels if that's what you like. Both cities are quite easy to explore on your own. You can either grab a local guide or get on a hop-on, hop-off bus tour. There's lots of different ways to be able to do that. So I'll be happy to give you any advice on those. Fran asked again about, are all the meals included? Yeah, as I just mentioned, Fran, the breakfast every day is included, in either lunch or dinner every day. In some cases, both, but usually just one or the other, which means you're on your own. And so, the question that often comes up, well, how much do I have to budget for lunch or dinner? Well, it's generally less expensive than in Canada, depending, of course, on what you want to eat. I mean, Italy has a tremendous number of Michelin star restaurants. So if you want to go out and spend $200 or $300 for a couple, you can easily do that. But at the same time, you can go in and have a simple Italian meal, be it a pizza or pasta or something like that, something light. Not that pasta is light, that might cost you 10, 15 euros, and a glass of wine, another 3 or 4 euros. So you could be having lunch or dinner for for say $25, $30 Canadian. So not a terribly significant cost when it comes to budgeting for this trip. Let's see. I've got another question here from Joy. How about the free days, or do we sell optionals? Yeah, we don't sell optionals. As I mentioned, how we work with the free days is that Amber is there to discuss with individual group members or groups of group members to say, oh, here are the different things that you could do. And let's facilitate that for you. And if you want to go off on a for example, if you're really active and you want to do some hiking in the Amalfi Coast, do the Path of Gods, for example, which is an incredibly beautiful hiking trail out of Positano. You can hop on a bus in about an hour, costs about 5-6 euros each way, and we'll facilitate that you get to the bus and you know everything you have to do. And so there's no tour, there's no optional tour that could be can be sold. Diane asked about what is the single supplement. And I just noticed that I don't have that on my, I'll tell you in 1 second, Diane. So in terms of pairing people up, though, what we do is that we don't sort of force pair people. So I know other companies will say, "Oh, we will match you with somebody else," but of course the operative word on that is that they will match, and I'm a little bit hesitant to do that. So as a result, we don't match people up. However, through our Facebook group, or if you are somebody that is looking to travel with somebody else, please let us know, and we'll do our best to get the word out there, because we have a lot of people, a lot of solo travelers who are looking to travel with somebody else, and who you can match up. I don't have the single supplement, Diane, right on the tip of my tongue. I've got all my other screens open. I will send you an email, and I'll get you that information. And it's certainly in our magazine and our tour brochure as well. You can see the single supplement for the program is. So I think that is all the questions that we have so far. So if you do have any more questions, by all means, please shoot us an email. We're happy to get all your questions answered, and then we'll get back to you right away. And so that pretty much wraps up our program. Again, our contact information is shown here. And you can download a copy of our magazine, our tour. We call it a tour magazine that gives you all the details of the program, and we'd love to see you on board. And we have many events coming up over the next couple of weeks here in Ontario, and in next month out in Western Canada. So please look for those on our website. We'd love to meet you in person. It's been great to meet numerous members over the last couple of weeks, and share stories about all our travels, and talk about some of these wonderful programs we're doing. So thank you again for participating this morning. I appreciate you all dialing in, and in the meantime, we'll hopefully catch you sometime soon at one of our events, or perhaps on this tour. So have yourselves all a wonderful day, and thanks again for coming.